The lesson objectives, you're going to be able to understand simple organizational charts. With this comes a lot of key terminology, and you're going to be able to understand and explain the key terms in organizational structures. And lastly, you're going to be able to analyze and compare the difference between a tall and flat organization. We're going to be using a lot of key terms this lesson: a hierarchy, spans of control, delegation and empowering, roles and responsibilities, functions, authority, accountability, flat and tall. So what exactly is an organizational structure? Well, you can see here, this is the organizational structure of our school, and you can see at the top of the structure of the Board of Governors, and they oversee the whole of the school, and they directly communicate with the head teacher. The head teacher then communicates to all the heads of faculty, and the heads of faculty then communicate down to the teachers of each faculty. So this is a very basic organizational structure of our school. But I'm going to give you a proper definition of an organizational structure. And that is, an organizational structure is how a business is laid out depending on your job role and responsibility. So whatever job role you have and whatever responsibilities you have will determine where in the business you are. This structure or organizational structure is also referred to as a hierarchy. We're going to look at the control in a business, and it's going to be in two parts. So the first part, we're going to be looking at spans of control, delegation and empowering, roles and responsibilities, and we're going to start off with spans of control. A span of control is the amount of people that you are responsible for. So you can see here that in the humanities department, Mr. Franklin is responsible for Ms. Canlish, Ms. Hencher, Mr. Devine and Mr. Dawati. So his span of control is 4. If we include the students in that, and let's say for example each class was to have 25 students, you'd have 100 students in plus 4 staff. So Mr. Franklin's span of control would be 104. A span of control is the amount of people that you are responsible for. Delegation and empowering. We're going to use a different structure here on the left hand side, a very small and basic one. And you can see here that I am responsible to Mr. Littlehales, who's the head of business studies. Now Mr. Littlehales has overall responsibility of the business department. But let's say for example Mr. Littlehales decides he can trust me to take responsibility for marking the exam papers, for example. So what he has done is he's delegated his responsibility to me. He's given me part of this responsibility because he trusts me. And what that basically means is that I'm quite happy and satisfied because Mr. Littlehales has trusted me with responsibility. So delegating responsibility downwards can empower someone and make them feel good. And roles and responsibilities in terms of your job, very, very basic. A job role is basically what your job title is. So my job role is business teacher, and your responsibilities are what you are responsible for doing. So as a business teacher, it's my responsibility to make sure that my students are prepared for their exam. The second part of controlling a business, we're going to look at functions, authority and accountability. And we're going to start off with functions. A function is also known as a department. So in our school you can see that there's one function called humanities, the maths function, the science function, the ICT function and the business and vocational function. A function is basically a department. What's authority? If you are a head or if you are a head of a department, or if you look after certain people, you have authority over the people that work underneath you. So all the business and vocational teachers are underneath the head of business. So they are what we call subordinates. And authority, you can see here, is where the head of business studies has authority over the teachers. So he controls them and has authority over them. Just remember that if you work under somebody, you are what we call a subordinate. And lastly, accountability. So if we look at authority, where the head of business is looking down or controlling the teachers underneath him, accountability then works the other way. And so as a business teacher, you are accountable, you are responsible to your head of business studies. Accountability is also known as responsibility. So you are responsible for your actions, and you are accountable to the head of business studies in this diagram as an example. So let's just revisit the lesson objectives then. So we should now understand what a simple organizational chart is, and we should also be able to define the key terms in relation to an organizational chart. But what we haven't done yet is to compare the difference between a tall and flat organization, and this is what we're going to do now. So in terms of tall and flat organizations, it basically means how many layers or levels of management that there are in a business. It's a bit like a wedding cake. The taller it is, the more layers it has, and the flatter it is, the less layers it has. So you can see here that this is a very tall organization, and there are a total of 12 different levels. Another organization, a bit more flatter, as you can see, a bit more wider, and this has only got 5 layers or levels. So you can see here that both of the layers are very different in terms of their structure. One's very tall and the other is very flat. So let's look at tall structures first. You can see here that there's a lot of layers in the organization, and that basically means that the lines of communication and responsibilities are very clear, because you know exactly who you have to communicate to. The managers have a narrow span of control. Because the organization has lots of layers, it means that the amount of people per layer is a lot less, which means the manager above you has less people to look after, so their span of control is smaller and more manageable, and there is a lot of opportunity for workers to be promoted, because there's a lot of structures, there's a lot of layers there, so there's more chance that you can get promoted and move to a higher layer. Because of this opportunity, it motivates workers and makes them want to work harder, because there is an opportunity, or a larger opportunity, to be promoted in the company. Now you can see here that in a very tall organization, if you remove some of the layers, so let's go back on the tall organization, if we decide that there's too many people working and we need to make some people redundant, we can take out some layers in a company. If we do that, you can see that we make the company a little more narrower. So let's remove some of the layers, and you can see there that there's a lot less layers in the company. That's what we call delayering. So you can see here a tall organization, let's remove some of the layers to save some money and get rid of some people, and you've got what we call delayering. So this is a flatter structure then, and here communication from the top to the bottom is a lot quicker. There's less layers, so from the top to the bottom there's less people to go through, and communication is much more quicker. In terms of communication then, the more layers you pass through, the more chance there is of communication or problems in communication. If you ever heard of the game Chinese Whispers, the more people that you go through and communicate to, the more chance there is that a mistake or miscommunication can occur. So in a narrow organization or a flat organization, there's less chance of communication issues to arise. In terms of the communication then, because there's less layers, the ideas from all levels are likely to be shared as they are known, as they know each other better. Okay, because you know the people above you or even above them a lot better, because there's a narrow organization. Okay, ideas can flow from all the different levels a lot better than in a tall organization. And the managers, and this maybe could be a bad thing, but the managers have a wider span of control. It basically means that the manager has to look after more people, which will mean that greater delegation will have to take place. So because a manager has a lot of responsibility and has to be responsible for a lot more people, he may delegate responsibility to the people below him, which means for the workers, they may become more motivated because they be given more responsibility. So what have we learned today? We've learned about an organizational structure. We should now know the key terms in relation to an organizational structure, explain them, and hopefully now you should have an appreciation of the difference between a tall and flat organization